have been what I think you have considered a friend of Charlie. At least you are a strong acquaintance of him. You had talked to him several times. You had done the Turning Point debate with Josh Hammer, the most impressive debate tutor of all time, whose skills are superseded by no one else, whose book on Israel is the best book. By the way, take a look at Josh Hammer's. But you know what I'm getting at. But you were a friend of Charlie. You spoke at his event. And what I want to talk about in relation to the investigation and the FBI narrative is maybe not the area in which you think. And we can talk about the particulars of, was this a conspiracy? Was it just Tyler Robinson? But I think that there are two other stories that really should be the lead here. I'm not saying those things aren't important, because they are important.
Sure.
But I think there are two other leads here. And number one, it was the fierce billionaire Zionist donor class pressure campaign against Charlie Kirk in his last months, what that kind of frustrations that seemed to produce for Charlie, and why he seemed to have turned against the pro-Israel cause. He said that himself in a chat message. That's number one. That's a microcosm for the influence the Israel lobby tries to pull and does pull in our government itself. So just imagine that kind of pressure in an organization like this. It's a pivotal part of our political system that, doesn't go unnoticed. And that this exposes that in some ways, at least Max Blumenthal's piece does. And also the other part being is that people just don't trust the FBI narrative about anything. And I say, if you want to blame Candace Owens, you want to blame Erica Kirk, you want to blame Nick Fuentes, whoever's like weighing into this thing, you can do that. But no one is to blame but the FBI for the fact that no one trusts them. And that's what I think after decades of killing, after Waco, Ruby Ridge, Fed entrapment schemes, COINTELPRO, you know it all. Do you agree with that? Do you think those should be the leads here?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I think all this stuff is really, really important, right? And so I thought it was interesting today. So when I was on Megyn Kelly's show, she did like a 10 or 15 minute opening monologue before I came on, but I was sitting there watching it, and she basically, and also I really try as best I can with everybody involved in this to try to keep in mind that like a lot, like I think this is one of the things, and I mean, like, forget how you feel about anything or how you feel about what you think actually happened. I think one of the most compelling things about Candace Owens, part of the reason why she's like, been the #1 podcast over the last couple months, has been that there's something it's just like must watch TV. It's so compelling. You're watching somebody who's in mourning, in deep grief, furious and vengeful about her dear friend who was like horrifically, violently murdered. And like that in itself is just like, whoa, there's something really compelling on a human level about that. And Megyn, you could see today, she was emotional about it too. I don't mean this like as a knock. I was emotional about it. Like, it's like, so there's this human element but anyway, so Megyn opens up with this 15-minute thing, and her thing was basically that she's convinced that Tyler Robinson is the killer. And then Megyn also, who's like, Megyn's like a lawyer, like a really accomplished lawyer who's like a shark of a lawyer. So she knows, she has a level of legal expertise that we don't. And she's making a whole bunch of fair points about how like, look, people are saying the FBI isn't like giving enough information, but that's not how you build a case. I'm sorry. And I understand this, where like sometimes there will be, when you'll have an area of some degree of expertise or something a lot about, and other people are going, how come it's not working like this? And you're like, excuse me, young lady, that's actually not how it works. And so like Megyn was giving a bunch of that. And I thought a lot of it was fair. She's like, no, you don't understand. And even stuff to me that I've said before, like, I don't like gag orders. I think they violate the First Amendment or something like that. And she's like, no, listen, here's why you have gag orders. And I was like, yeah, all right, that is kind of a fair point. Like, you really don't. And she gave this example about gag orders, or about even why you should not be talking. And it was from the O.J. Simpson trial, which I knew this, but I'd forgotten about it, where one of the key witnesses who had seen O.J. fleeing the case went and sold her story to a corporate media outlet before the trial. And that made her useless as a witness to the prosecution, because once they went, you're only in it for the money, You already got money to say this story. So now the jury just disregards that and you go, see, if you hadn't done that, you would have been a compelling. So like there are layers to this, right? So she lays out this whole case and I'm sitting there and I'm going, hey, look, I can't really disagree with anything you just said. However, I go, Meg, you got to understand why nobody trusts this Justice Department ever again. And then she goes, yep, completely right about that. Like, I cannot argue with that at all. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that, you know, it's like, right, that is a pretty big part of this, that nobody trusts anything you guys are saying. Now, as far as the dynamic that was going on before Charlie Kirk died, like say from, you know, last summer when we had that student action summit from like whatever, I think it was in July, if I'm not mistaken. So like July to September when he gets killed. You know, this was something that I was talking about a lot on my show because, you know, I don't know that much more than anybody else other than my little experience of going in there and debating at this event. But it was shocking to me. Like even at the time, I remember, so I was in Denver and I was doing, you know, Charlie had invited me to do the thing. And he was like, hey, we got this student action summit and it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was like, and he invited me to it. And I was like, well, the thing is, I'm in Denver Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He was like, well, maybe you could come in for that Sunday, you know? And so like, I had to find a flight that was like first thing in the morning to get in there. So I'd have enough time and they pushed back the event to make it happen. So like I got there right at the end, but I remember thinking, all right, I'm going in to do this Israel debate in front of Turning Point USA. There's going to be a hostile crowd, you know? And then as I was out in Denver, I saw the tapes from Friday and Saturday, or the clips on Twitter of Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. I was like, whoa, the crowd's way on their side. Like, that's really surprising. So then I went in there and then I was texting with Tucker and he was like, dude, they're going to love you. And he goes, none of the organizers necessarily. He goes, but the kids there are going to love you. And then it was like, I mean, it wasn't like it was my crowd, but it was like a lot more my crowd than it was not my crowd. Like if you watch the debate with me and Josh Hammer, it was when he introduces me, he goes, and we have Dave Smith, and then he and then he goes, oh, we got a lot of Dave Smith fans here. Like it was already. And so there was this very interesting dynamic that was going on that you could just see that like everyone, Charlie Kirk was in this position where he had this organization, Turning Point USA. And, you know, like a lot of us are kind of, you know, me and you, and I think Candace and Tucker and like a lot of other people, essentially the relationship here is us and the audience. We got to make something that the audience likes, and then we do well. And if we make something the audience doesn't like, it won't do as well. In an organization like Turning Point, where you have chapters in 40 states or whatever it is, and you got, you know, it's like millions and millions of dollars that it costs to do this whole thing. You need your donors, and then you need the young activists. And so Charlie Kirk is here caught between a rock and a hard place. He's caught between, okay, the young activists are not having this anymore, but the donors won't even let you host a debate about it, you know? And so like, eventually this is why he, I think, got pushed to the point where he was like, I'm going to have to abandon them. Now, I don't know. I never want to like oversell our case. And I always I don't always do this perfectly, but we should always try to kind of have the thing where if there's any evidence that confirms your bias, you scrutinize it that much more. You know, so like, don't just go with it because then you can get sloppy. Now, the fact that Charlie Kirk texted, I'm going to have to abandon Israel. If they want to say he was venting, it was okay, maybe. I don't know that Charlie Kirk was about to come out and turn on Israel, but man, it's really fascinating enough already that he was at least privately saying that, you know, like he was at least privately saying that it's like, okay, so he wasn't all in anymore. He was at least questioning it. And people are pissed off at Megyn Kelly for hosting me today, but like I texted you earlier today and I went, we all know the interview they're really pissed off about, and it ain't the one with me. What they're pissed off about is that Charlie Kirk came there and really explained how pissed off he was that because he was getting bullied and he didn't like that. And I understand that, I've been bullied like when I was a little kid and stuff. And like, I don't know, but like what adult man who's a multi-millionaire, who has millions of people who love them is gonna be bullied? You know what I mean? Like at a certain point in life, you're like, dude, are you out of your mind? Like it's like when people today, like I said, it happens to me all the time where almost essentially like people like on social media or another podcast or whatever are essentially just trying to bully me. Like that's what they do. You're a failed comedian, anti-Semite. I mean, what is that other than what you're trying to make me feel bad so that then I say, oh no, I didn't really mean the thing I said because of these mean words. But like, what are you going to bully me? A non-account on Twitter? Like, I'm a grown man with a wife and kids who's successful. There's a lot of people who support me. You think you're going to intimidate me out of that? And I think there was a lot of that with Charlie, where he really was clear. I mean, you could see it in that interview, clear as day. He was resenting the fact that these guys would come at him the way he did. Now, whether that has anything to do with him getting killed, I just really don't know. I mean, it certainly is suspicious that it was happening right at the time before he got killed. But even if it has nothing to do with why he got killed, that in some ways is a bigger, more relevant story than even who did kill him. Or especially, I'd say, if the actual answer is that it was just, whatever, it had nothing to do with a bigger conspiracy than that. It was Tyler Robinson and maybe there was a network of crazy leftists who wanted to do this to him. Okay, then that's a terrible thing. It's a horrible crime and a high profile, political assassination. But still, almost the bigger story is that even the most pro-Zionist guy who ran the biggest youth get out the vote, organization, even he couldn't be honest for 1 second. Even when he wasn't saying anything like I'm against Israel, certainly wasn't saying anything like I don't like the Jews. He was just going like, there's some points here that I can't really counter. Like that is a really important story, no matter what the larger implications are.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And the irony here is that the same sort of thing seems to be happening to Megyn Kelly now, where because she doesn't toe the line on every single aspect of the pro-Israel cause, that's not good enough for them. It wasn't good enough to have a debate between you and Josh Hammer. They don't want a debate. They want Hasbara, and that is a story for sure. I think your insight there on what the audience, how they reacted, was a story in and of itself. Absolutely. And, say what you want about Candace's investigation. I'm open to the idea that there may have been a conspiracy. To me, the evidence that sticks out in my mind, or maybe not evidence is the right way to say it, but the George Zinn decoy thing, I just can't get away from, man, that this guy is going to say, I'm the shooter. Then when he's taken to the police station, he's saying, I'm not the shooter, but I did that to try to distract and allow the real shooter to get away. And then he just gets let off the hook, and he got a child
popped. Yeah, got a child porn. He got a charge right
like that. He did, but it's still, that's the thing that I can't wrap my head around. Now, at the same time, Candace's investigation has exposed these guys for what they are after lying about him for weeks, especially Josh Hammer being in that chat group saying that Charlie went down as the rigid, most pro-Zionist zealot of all time. That exposes, the lunacy of that when you're on the record lying about it so many times. And what I want to finish with, and then just get your response to on this, is just to say that, the best insight that I heard recently on this, no matter what you think about who's culpable or if it was a conspiracy, it was or was not Tyler Robinson, is from Theo Von, believe it or not. He had a podcast recently with Tucker Carlson. I don't know, maybe you saw it, where he said,
I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen some clips of it. But yeah,
he was talking about like this situation as if it was a proverbial garden. And he said essentially that, I don't like everything that Candace Owens necessarily plucks out of the garden and digs out of it, but I sure am glad she's digging, because the alternative is a garden that's tilled by the FBI and deep state down the line on everything. So what do you think about that? Do you agree? Do you think that there's something to that?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a tweet maybe a couple months back. It was when they were, I think, I can't remember who I said, but I guess Ben Shapiro was one of them. But I said, Theo Vaughn is ironically a better public intellectual than Ben Shapiro. And I really mean that. Like, and there's something, I love Theo. I just really, really like that guy a lot. And there's something about him that he's got this like boyish, innocent quality about him, but he speaks from the heart and he means what he says. And he doesn't pretend to be any smarter than he is. Hey, he knows his own limitations, but he's just like, hey, my thing is, obviously he's hilarious. He's like a really, really funny person. But then his other thing is that he's sincere. And he's really genuine. And so I love stuff like that. And, I totally agree. I mean, the way I've said it before is that and there's room, I think maybe there's something here about the division of labor or something like that, where we all do different things. But Candace Owens' thing is not like, I think and a lot of the people in our camp, the Scott Hortons of the world, the Murray Rothbards, for people who know Murray Rothbard, one of the greatest political geniuses of the 20th century, they're like precision strikers. You know what I mean? Like they try to make like the perfect, airtight, irrefutable argument. Here are the facts. Here's what we can deduce logically. Here's what we know empirically. Like, let me try to bang every shot in perfectly. Candace, I think, is a little bit more of like, she's like a pit bull. She's going to grab everything, lock her teeth into it, and shake it until whatever's in it falls out. And I will be the first to admit that sometimes she grabs some things and shakes them and like nothing really fell out there, But then other times she grabs a thing and people go, "Oh, you're so crazy for grabbing this thing." And then she shakes it and like 3 really important things fall out. And so it's like, I think there's a really important role for that. And there's always been a role for kind of like the iconoclastic, like, even like contrarians or just like, like people who are provocative and ask questions that no one else is asking and go down roads and perhaps there's a value in those people who almost like aren't afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to go down a path and then nothing came of it and go, okay, nothing came of that. Let's move to this one. But I will agree with you that the fact that if nothing else, man, if nothing else, and I'm sure there's more than just this, but if nothing else, the fact that, as you just mentioned, when Candace Owens first said, hey, there were Zionist donors pulling their money out, Charlie was re-questioning his whole thing. And they all said that was the craziest anti-Semitic conspiracy theory ever. And then it was completely proven correct. No question about that anymore. All of that is 100% factually correct. That is a big deal. That is really important information for the rest of us to learn. And even though I will say, man, I want to make sure I get this right. And again, it's always a little bit awkward here because I'm friends with so many people involved in this. But I will say, if I'm remembering this correctly, when Benjamin Netanyahu first, like immediately after Charlie Kirk's death, read like a couple sentences from the letter that Benjamin Netanyahu had sent to that Charlie Kirk, had sent to Benjamin Netanyahu. And then Candace Owens went, that you are lying through your teeth, released the full letter. And I think, if I'm not getting this wrong, I think Candace had either like explicitly said, or at least implied that like there was something in that letter about how he was turning on Israel.
Yeah.
Now,
She did
Now,
imply that, at least under my interpretation of watching her
yeah,
too.
if I'm remembering this correctly, right? Okay, so like looking back now, also this is with a big caveat of assuming that the full letter that we saw was actually the letter, which I don't know either, because I think that did come from the Benjamin Netanyahu.
Turning Point confirmed that the letter was legitimate themselves.
Okay, fine.
Actually did. So just take that for what it's will.
But
too.
even taking that as let's say that's given that the letter is official. Okay, well then you'd have to say that, okay, Candace Owens didn't exactly get it right. But again, like I was saying before, directionally, in the spirit of what she was saying, Benjamin Netanyahu clearly lied by omission there. I mean, like, it is a crazy thing to say that to pick the letter. I go, Charlie Kirk just wrote me this letter about how much he loved Israel, when really the entire letter was, dude, we are getting slaughtered out here. I have no answer for these talking points. This Hasbara bullshit needs to be updated. It needs an entire overhaul. Like, I don't even know how we're gonna, like, the letter was panicking, going, dude, I don't know how to defend you anymore. And so maybe it wasn't quite what Candace had kind of implied it was, but at the same time, it sure as hell wasn't what Netanyahu implied it was. And the only reason we found out what it really was is because Candace, went on, she locked her pit bull teeth into that and shook it until something fell out. And so in a situation like that, I don't know. I suppose this is a little bit subjective, but do I go, hey, Candace, you got it wrong? No, my attitude is to go, all right. I wouldn't have known about this information if it wasn't for you probing relentlessly like that. So I just think that sometimes there are figures like Candace Owens, and I'll admit I'm biased because I just love her. And I don't know. I think she's great. I really like I've met her and I know her and I just really like her a lot. And she's been very cool to me. So, okay, I'm a little biased, but at the same time, I think that while, like, there's always been throughout history, there's always been figures that kind of like, are necessary to be these, like, the type of people who will say the thing that's really dangerous to say and take all of the arrows coming into them. And even like if they say 10 things, maybe all 10 of them weren't exactly correct, but like 4 of them were the most important things that you needed to know. And then like, 2 of them were maybe correct. And then 4 of them were like just wrong. We need people like that too. And so like, I think while it's really easy for the people like the Josh Hammers, the Ben Shapiros of the world to harp on the 4 out of 10 things she got wrong and go, look how horrible a person she is for that. It's like, I don't know. I take that and I go, okay, but what did she reveal? Because I think that's also kind of important.
Yeah, it just seems like there's this campaign to consider her like the most vile human being and just excoriate her for that, when you don't even launch half as much indignation toward like a presidential administration that's covering up a child sex trafficking ring or launching new wars or disbanding Doge and not taking it seriously. All these things.
All these people. Look, in some way, I wish everybody would just be Ron Paul all the time, Like, I don't know. I don't completely agree with Candace on everything or Tucker on everything. I love both of them, but I don't agree with them on everything. But at the same time, Dave, as you know, in their careers, the worst thing that Tucker Carlson ever did was support the war in Iraq. And the worst thing that Candace Owens ever did was support Israel for all those years, And that was before they were like genociding the people of Gaza, but they were still an apartheid state that sure had slaughtered a whole bunch of them. And she supported them, to her own admission, out of her ignorance and just going along with the flow of the other people. That's the worst thing Candace Owens has ever done. And the worst thing Tucker Carlson had ever done was go along with the neocon establishment. And so now the neocon establishment wants to talk about how bad they are now. Get out of here, dude. The worst thing they ever did was ever be a part of your evil club. So I'm just not even listening to any of those people.